You just don't care, no. I don't wanna play, baby, I'm just fine. I don't need you anymore.
For content information and the link to the written version of this chapter, please check the description below. If you would like to support me, please consider checking out my links in the description. They include my Cash App, my GoFundMe, my email address for inquiries, including story commissions, and also you'll find my Twitter handle at UTUwithJJ. Now, this is the finale of Serving 1, so it is going to be a little bit longer, so I do want to get straight into it. And this finale is called Chapter 12, Distant Screams. Are you ready? Because it's a doozy. BD looked at Tiramisu in confusion. How is it Friday already? Tiramisu laughed and sat on the edge of BD's bed. You were out for some time there. You're lucky Victoria was too busy the last few days planning for your party and... All warmth drained from Tiramisu's face, replacing it with a cold, distant stare. What is it? BD asked, placing a hand on a woman's forearm. She's been planning your expiration. BD gasped in horror. Don't worry. The rebels have a plan to get you out, but for the meantime you... Tiramisu stood and walked over to a changing screen in the corner of the room. She stepped behind it out of sight and then popped back into view holding one of Victoria's most ridiculous-looking dresses. Gotta get you into this. Tiramisu smiled as BD protested and fell back into the comfort of her pillow. Cece felt confident about her plan. She had come up with the plan. Why wouldn't she trust her own plan? She walked towards the mansion gate in a rather uncomfortable brown gown. She was used to wearing large dresses, but she ensured she would wear only the largest to blend into such celebrations as birthday party. As she made her way through the gate, hiding between several other guests, she bumped into a fancy-looking couple linked by the arm. The man was tall and wearing a divine suit composed of a pink jacket and yellow trousers. The rim of his yellow top hat sat gently upon his soft, curly marzipan hair, which in turn caressed his spongy face. It was an odd face, Cece thought. It consisted of 4 sections of sponge, pink sponge covering his yellow-coloured eye, and yellow sponge covering his pink-coloured eye. The woman attached to the man's arm was rather unusual herself. She wore a long straight dress, bedazzled with rubies across the entirety of the chest in a heart formation, ending at the waist which sat just a bit lower than her hip. She had quite a lot of skin showing, which whilst unusual compared to what every other woman was wearing, stood out even more due to her bright red skin. The couple looked over Cece briefly before giggling to each other. I'm ever so sorry, madam. No offence was intended. The man began. I am Lord Battenberg, and this is my lady companion. He motioned to the woman. Red, though Victoria would rather have me introduce myself as Lady Velvet. Lady Velvet gave a gentle curtsy to Cece, who quickly introduced herself by her full name, Coffee Cake. It was of no surprise to Cece that Victoria had told Lady Velvet how to introduce herself, and it was clear the young woman, who couldn't have been more than 100 years old, would much rather be called Red. It's lovely to meet you, Red, Cece whispered to the woman, who placed her red hand on her mouth to stifle another giggle. Oh, Batty, ain't she just gorgeous? Red swooned as she took in the beauty of Cece's dress. Yes, but may I remind you that you are accompanying me to the party? Lord Battenberg looked down at Lady Velvet, who quickly rearranged her face to mimic his stern expression. She giggled again, a common trait for her it might seem, and responded with, Well, that's a shame too. I've had many a madam on my arm who didn't look half as pretty. Red gave Cece a knowing wink before Lord Battenberg pulled her away, forcing her to shuffle along the courtyard in her little dark burgundy T-strap heels. Cece watched as Red's short, stunningly white frosting hair bounced on her neck as she was hurried towards the door. Once Cece had entered the large ballroom in the east of the mansion, she was overwhelmed by the sheer number of guests that had arrived at what should have been such a simple party. After her brief encounter with Red, she was almost tempted to mingle more with these interesting characters, who, to nobody's surprise, appeared to all be cakes, aside from the odd flan or tart. She made polite small talk with a gentleman who called himself Sir Lamington, before spotting Tati Tatin motioning her over from the corner of the room. Cece excused herself from Lord Lamington's presence, with him gifting her a kiss on the hand, and discreetly made her way over to Tati Tatin. She positioned herself so that she was facing away from him, so it didn't look like she was conversing with a servant. Victoria is getting dressed. Now is the time to sneak the others in. I believe they're at the entrance to the tunnel. Cece resisted the urge to turn to Tati Tatin. If they are down in the servants' quarters, why don't they let themselves in? She said from the side of her mouth. Well, the door may or may not be jammed. Tati Tatin gave a nervous laugh and received a side scowl from Cece. Where are the twins? She asked nervously, referring to Blondie and Brownie, who were now almost certainly on the ground, and also not technically twins, as if it mattered. They are upstairs at the moment, Tati Tatin said before hurrying Cece out of the ballroom. Down in the servants' quarters, Cece wrestled with the stiff metal door that opened to the secret underground tunnels. After a good minute of heaving, she finally managed to pull it open, allowing SJ, Sinner, Tiger, Pumpkin, Blackcurrant, and Apricot in. The 6 people let out a sigh of relief, which Cece allowed for only a second. We have to start quickly. You've already wasted time breaking the door. Everyone looked at each other awkwardly. It's not a good sign, is it? Sinner muttered sarcastically. Cece ignored his quip. Apricot, we have to get you upstairs now. You have to distract Blondie and Brownie as much as you can. Blackcurrant grabbed his sister by the wrist and pulled her over to look each other in the eyes. Are you sure you can do this? It's not too late to change your mind, he begged. Apricot nodded semi-confidently. Now I won't lie to you, Apricot. This is dangerous. Like I've warned you before, probably one of the most dangerous jobs out of any of us, Cece warned, hoping Apricot had what it took to keep Blondie and Brownie away. I can do it. I know I can, Apricot replied, looking from Cece and back to her brother. Blackcurrant hugged his sister tightly, stifling a tear. Please, come back to me, he whispered in her ear. She pulled away and smiled at him as Tati Tatin helped her into the maintenance lift. Right, you know what to do, boys, Cece clapped. SJ and Sinner, you two get upstairs whilst the twins are distracted and grab Birthday, and you two, she pointed to Pumpkin and Blackcurrant, you get Tiger here, up into the middle of that room. Everyone nodded. As Blackcurrant walked towards the door, he took one last look back at the now empty maintenance lift. Apricot crawled out of the lift and into the hall, dusting off her old orange dress as she stepped onto even ground. As she slowly walked forward, she heard what sounded like a muffled cry for help. That must be Birthday, she whispered to herself in fear. As she walked further down, she was relieved to look into one room and see Birthday being helped into a rather large dress by who she could only assume was Tiramisu. As she walked further down the hall, she began feeling more and more fearful. She could swear the end of the hall grew darker, and as it did, the muffled cries grew louder. Taking a deep breath, Apricot slowly peeked around the doorframe of one of the rooms, only to see Blueberry Delight bound with rope to a wooden chair in the middle of the room. The gagged woman shook with excitement when she saw Apricot, who shushed her before sneaking into the room. Thank you, Blueberry cried with relief. Apricot placed a finger to her lips, which made Blueberry nod silently as she was being untied. After the last rope was undone, Blueberry shakily stood from her chair and Apricot stood back to make sure she was okay. I was forced to do it, Blueberry cried. They told me if I didn't help them, they would expire me like the others. Suddenly Apricot was back in the cafe, watching as her brother was forced to decide which sister should be expired, Apricot or Strawberry. At the time, Apricot wanted to sacrifice herself, but then so did Strawberry, and Blackcurrant would never be able to choose between them. They were a family. They had found each other. They shared the same features. They felt like they belonged. Strawberry was stabbed by Brownie, and now Apricot could feel that pain. At first she thought it was just the pain of the memory, until she looked down and saw the knife sticking out through her stomach. Apricot looked at Blueberry, feeling the sting of betrayal yet again. She didn't have time to turn around to see who stabbed her. She knew it was Brownie. She was joining her sister now, as another victim to Brownie's blade, but yet all she could think about was how Blackcurrant was now fully alone. Blackcurrant, she whispered as a tear stuck to her sticky face. Strawberry. She reached out to the image of her sister smiling at her as her vision blurred into nothing. Good work, Brownie said, smiling at Blueberry, who looked just a little guilty about tricking Apricot, but not enough for it to weigh fully down on her conscience. Brownie and Blueberry both quickly ran to the stairs, where they saw 3 of the rebels cautiously walking past. Is that the bread you mentioned? Brownie asked, quickly hiding herself behind a wall. Blueberry nodded from the other side of the staircase, and Brownie cursed under her breath. As soon as the coast was clear, she lunged herself from the top of the stairs and fell forwards gracefully through the air before colliding into Pumpkin Pie. Without a second of hesitation, she slit Pumpkin's throat and collapsed fully onto the hard ground as soon as he vanished. Blackcurrant and Tiger, startled by the crash, turned to see Brownie looking at them with pure anger. Blackcurrant screamed as Tiger threw him over his shoulder and ran out into the crowd of the ballroom. All eyes were on them as Brownie penetrated the crowd with her knife fully in view. Cece, who was already in the ballroom, after casually making her way back a few minutes before the boys, prepared herself to sneak off once again to warn SJ and Cinna about this unsettling development. But like a moth to a flame, Brownie looked on to Cece and ran for her. Cece prepared herself to run, but fell at the feet of none other than Victoria. Look what we have here, ladies and gentlemen, Victoria amplified her voice to be heard by the crowd. Why run, Coffee Cake, if you have nothing to hide? Cece looked up defeated and begged the crowd for help. Only Red stepped forwards to her defence before Lord Battenberg placed his arm across her to keep her back. She will be okay, he whispered to Red as she averted her eyes in fear. A jam-curdling scream could be heard as Cece was stabbed in the back before a deathly silence filled the room. That woman actively planned to have me expired, Victoria boomed authoritatively. Many of the guests looked over to her unconvinced. What? You don't believe me? Victoria laughed hysterically. My own daughter was in this coop. Yes, that's right. Birthday, Brownie gasped, shocked that her mother would go against their plans so quickly. Find me Hee-Ha, Victoria cried as Brownie slowly led her away from the crowd. Bring her to me. As this scene was commencing, it wasn't difficult for Blackcurrant and Tiger to make their way to the centre of the room. A woman stepped forward and brought the pair to everyone's attention. Who is that? She admired Tiger. Victoria snapped her head towards Tiger and Blackcurrant, who now had the attention of the room. Ignore them, Madame Leclerc. Everyone. They are not important, Victoria begged and struggled against Brownie, who tried calming her down. Tiramisu and Beedie froze on the stairway upon hearing the commotion. Tiramisu led Beedie to a lounge in order to hide her from Victoria and Brownie. As she opened the door, Beedie prepared to squeeze her massive dress through the small door frame. Blondie smiled sinisterly. Standing in the centre of the room, Beedie turned quickly and without thinking headed towards the ballroom. Tiramisu ran close behind as Birthday burst into the ballroom. Tiramisu pushed herself against a thin wooden table and her hand knocked on an ornate empty vase. She tried to grab the vase without looking and accidentally knocked it off the side, causing it to smash and bringing everyone's attention onto them. Tiramisu bent down as Blondie approached slowly. Aware of the eyes on her, Tiramisu sliced her hand on a shard of vase, allowing a small trickle of coffee to form a puddle on the ground. Wincing in pain, Tiramisu flung her arm back, releasing the shard and sending it flying across the room towards Blondie, getting caught in her neck. Blondie spluttered as she popped out of existence and expired. Just at that moment, SJ and Cinna found themselves peering around the doorframe. In a state of pure, unfiltered rage, Brownie sprinted across the room and into a leap, much like the way she expired Pumpkin not too long ago, landed on Cinna. Cinna ran into the ballroom, shaking off the ferocious stabbing attempts by Brownie. Beedie rushed forwards from the corner and grabbed Brownie, who turned viciously on her heels to stare her sister in the eyes. She laughed through a menacing grin as she plummeted the knife through Cinna's shoulder and into his neck before allowing him to fall to the ground. Everyone in the room gasped as Beedie crouched down as far as she could to support Cinna's head against her dress. Birthday? Cinna asked distantly as Brownie fled the scene, abandoning her mother. Shh, I'm right here, Cinna. Beedie fought back her tears. I love you. Cinna smiled, holding his focus on Beedie for as long as he could. I know. Shh. Beatty forced a smile so that it would be the last thing Cinna saw. She awkwardly placed a kiss on his sticky forehead as he faded blissfully out of existence. The crowd prepared to flee, but they were rounded up by Rock and Pound Cake, who refused to let anyone leave. They arrived shortly after they had seen Brownie rush out towards the garden. Rock came up behind Beatty and forcefully dragged her towards Victoria, as she flailed and panicked trying to escape. She is the reason this has happened. Victoria pointed accusingly towards Beatty, who was brought ever closer to the jaws of the monster. If you're enjoying this chapter, please consider checking out my Patreon, which is linked in the description below. For £1, or your currency's equivalent of £1, you will be able to see all of my videos a day before they are released. That is my Patreon, linked in the description below. Thank you for considering. Now back to the story. SJ now stood in the centre of the room with Blackcurrant and Tiger, unsure what to do and how to help. My name is Tiger Bread. Tiger brought the attention back to him, and by association, SJ and Blackcurrant. A couple of people remembered Tiramisu's presence and looked to her, so she also made her way to the centre of the room, drawing more attention to her as well. This is the lowdown on who I am and where my people have been for the last 2 centuries. Everyone hung on to Tiger's words. Even Victoria was intrigued at this development. My people lived on this land far longer than any of you groovy people. We lived in our villages happy and content as we began discovering ways to build ourselves. Then these cakes, you cakes, came along and stole our wealth, told everyone we were the bad guys, and made us build this very mansion using the wealth we earned. The room gasped in shock. Oh my, that's awful. Lady Velvet piped up. I honestly, truly had no idea. Many people nodded at her statement, but there were some who bowed their heads in shame. It's true. Beatty managed to break free from Rock whilst she was distracted. I was there. Victoria blinked and tilted her head, taken aback by this outburst. In my last life, I was the one who did this to the Breads. Beatty was in tears now. I did this. I forced them out of their wealth. I forced them to hide. It was me. SJ stepped forward to comfort his friend. No, Beatty, it wasn't your fault, he pleaded. Beatty turned and smiled, re-acknowledging SJ in the room. I saw it all, SJ. I saw it through my own eyes, what I had done. Victoria stepped forward and laughed. She admits it. She's the reason all this happened. Why am I? Who I am? Victoria polished herself off and then proceeded to push herself closer and closer to Beatty, who stepped back every time she approached. The crowd parted to let them through. She's the cause of all this. It's your fault, isn't it, birthday cake? Beatty cried. Yes, it is. Victoria appeared to grow larger every time Beatty spoke badly of herself. She grew more powerful as Beatty grew weaker. No, it's not your fault, SJ screamed distantly. You weren't the same person you are now. His words didn't reach Beatty as she crumpled to the ground, crying into her large dress, shielding her eyes with her hands. It's not your fault, Tiger called on behalf of the Breads. Hearing Tiger say those words brought everyone onto Beatty's side. If a Bread didn't think she was to blame for what her past self did, why did they have the right to blame her? It's Victoria, Madame Eclair declared. She's trying to push all of her responsibility onto Birthday. Everyone yelled in agreement. Even Rock and Pound Cake stood back to allow them to get to Victoria. Victoria grabbed Beatty by the hair, forcing her to her feet and looking her in the eyes. You did this, Birthday. Even in this pathetically weak form, you are still my granddad inside. Victoria stepped back, releasing Beatty with such force that she fell back and bashed her head against the wall. The tip of her candle brushed against a long rope holding the grand chandelier. The rope quickly caught ablaze as the fire made its way along the surface. The rope tore from the wall and span, causing sparks to fly over everything, catching clothes, curtains, wherever it could. Victoria looked up in horror as the chandelier crashed upon her, its large glass blades forcing themselves down into either side of her head, splitting her into 3 slices. They fell to the ground and disappeared from existence. Victoria's eyes opened wide, blinded by an intense white light. It was impossible to place where she was. She was nowhere. She looked down as her skin began slowly breaking apart. Sponge dissolved into butter, eggs, flour, sugar, and milk as they swirled into the air. Her insides and hair also broke apart to form the ingredients of cream and jam. The ingredients recombined into a new form. They slowly baked back into sponge, the cream falling onto its head, and the body emerged from a fountain, gasping for air. A naked man now stood in its water with no memory of who he once was. As he slowly left the fountain, he turned to see even more naked people emerging from the water, so many that the fountain even began to crack under the weight. Apple and Pecan were sitting comfortably, talking about themselves. They had learned a lot about each other during their time keeping watch for SJ, Sinner and BD. Pecan explained how he had met Pumpkin, and that it was love at first sight, and how they've been married almost 200 years, with the blessing of the cake in charge, Sponge. Apple was confused as to why two people would need a blessing to be married, but it was explained that the law states they have to ask the cake in charge. Apple explained how he had become a spy, and how himself and Tati Tatin had started a secret relationship from either side of the garden wall. He also explained how he came to meet the person on the other side of the city's surrounding wall. Apparently they had just been walking away from their home when they heard Apple trying to climb over the side. They had had no idea that anyone was even on this side of the wall, but when they told their people, it turned out Cakeopia was well known to them, and there was nothing they could do to help from their side. "Do you think we should be worried?" Pecan changed the subject quickly, realizing just how long they had been waiting. Apple stood and helped Pecan to his feet. As soon as they were up, 3 people ran past screaming. Floods of people now exited. Apple and Pecan clung to each other's hand as they pushed their way through the sea of people. As they reached the door, they saw Tati Tatin standing in the doorway. "Tati Tatin!" Apple called, hoping he could be heard. A woman collapsed and was trampled until she expired, leaving Tati Tatin's body in full display. It was on fire. Tati Tatin didn't make a sound as he slowly burned alive. The smell of burning apples filled the air. Apple Pie forced its way over to Tati Tatin and tried putting him out to no avail. Tati Tatin crumpled to dust, leaving nothing behind. They weren't sure how it had happened, but somehow SJ and BD were separated from Tiramisu, Blackcurrant and Tiger. They found a quiet room full of smoke, but not burning like the others, and fell to the ground, both covered in ash. SJ crawled towards BD, wheezing as the smoke filled his chest. The only light they had was that of BD's candle. All they could hear was the raging fire and the very distant screams of those who were expiring. "So," BD coughed. "Are you going home after this?" she asked with a slight laugh. A tear filled SJ's eyes as he felt for his friend's hand. "No." BD turned to SJ in confusion, unsure if he understood her sense of humour. "BD, you are my home." She pulled him into her and held him close as the pair wept in each other's company, knowing this would be their last moments. "Do you think I will come back again?" BD asked after a while. "Do you think I'll remember?" SJ shrugged his shoulders. "I don't know. I don't know how, but I think somehow Pharaoh manipulated you into remembering your past. They seem to know exactly what would happen." BD contemplated this. "Maybe. I wonder if they knew the world would burn," she said with a nod. After a few moments, the pair lay unconscious as the mansion collapsed around them. "How many were lost?" Pharaoh asked, adjusting themselves to the daylight which they hadn't seen in years. "Maybe 66, Tiger guessed. "Well, so much for people coming back from expiring." Peter looked to the dust pile that used to be the mansion. "Oh, they'll be back. The fountain isn't the only doorway," Pharaoh promised as they were approached by a shivering Lady Velvet, using Lord Battenberg's coat for warmth. "How are they?" Pharaoh asked the woman. "I reckon they'll be okay. No better than the rest of us." She looked back to see SJ and Brady asleep, resting against each other under the same blanket. And Brownie and Blueberry?" They pressed on. "Blueberry is long gone. Pieces of her dress were found by what I guess was the stairs. Brownie is long gone as well, but..." She coughed. "She left long before the fire." A week after what was being dubbed the Big Burn, a group was formed to discuss the future of the city now that Victoria was officially gone. Pharaoh represented the breads, Apple Pie the citizens of Cakeopia, and Lady Velvet represented what was left of the cakes. SJ, BD, Tiramisu, Blackcurrant, Pecan and Tiger sat in as witnesses. So first of all, I believe we should still remain a city, Apple suggested, to which everyone nodded. Yes, let's just knock down that horrible wall, Lady Velvet suggested before a round of applause from everyone including herself. Of course that will be worked on right away, Pharaoh assured the room. Might I also suggest we rename the city from Cakeopia to something like Baketopia? He looked to Pharaoh and then to Lady Velvet, who both nodded encouragingly. Yes, Baketopia does sound much more inclusive, Lady Velvet approved. I think we can all agree, not just one person should have all the power, Apple stated, to which the room all nodded, though there was a small bit of hesitation from Pharaoh. We shall have a system where we all make decisions, that is everyone living in the city, deciding collectively what's best for the city. Again there were nods. What about you guys? Apple leaned forward over the table. What's next for you? Tiramisu revealed that she planned to take over the cafe. Blackcurrant planned to take up construction work, hoping the manual labour would help distract him from losing both his sisters, just days apart from each other. Pecan planned to try and continue his market stall alone without his husband, and Tiger decided he would help out with the tearing down of the wall. What about you, SJ, and Birthday? Apple directed his attention to them. Well, you all know you are my family, she smiled, especially at SJ. Firstly, I've decided to call myself BD, officially, from now on. I don't want to be stuck with the name associated with you-know-who. Apple nodded in understanding. But there's something I still need to know. Everyone looked at her curiously. The whereabouts of my Aunt Maddie is still unknown, and from my old memories I can see she was also a victim of the Cake dynasty. I want to search beyond the wall for her and my cousins, as well as discovering what happened to the cookies. Apple turned to look at SJ as if to ask him what he planned to do. Oh, I'm going with her, he laughed. Really? BD asked. Of course. Like I said, you are my home. And also, I still want to get out of here and see the world? Apple gave a wide smile. We will be here if you ever decide to return. Hopefully Baketopia will be as well. Everyone came to wave SJ and BD off as they stepped through the first hole in the wall, opening onto a large open field. Now, it's apparently about a day's walk to the next settlement, Apple warned them. Maybe that's where the cookies are, BD suggested. I'm going to miss you, SJ. Apple hugged his friend tight. I'll see you before you know it, he promised. Right, SJ? Are you ready? BD asked, offering her arm to her friend. The pair stepped through the small gap in the wall. SJ placed his hand on a brick to steady himself. As he got a quick glance of it, he could swear some more sugar was missing on the back of his hand. He shrugged it off, and they stepped onto the field, waving goodbye to their family. What do you say, SJ? Want to run for old time's sake? Without hesitation, SJ began running, pulling BD behind him as she laughed and quickly overtook him. A day would go by in a flash. Oof, that was a lot, wasn't it? Thank you so much for sticking out for this chapter. I hope you enjoyed it. The Serving 2 will begin next month in October and will end on Christmas Day with the Christmas special. And then Serving 3 will be out in the following January of next year, where all new chapters will be created. I really love this story and I really hope that you enjoy it as well. So thank you for watching this video and supporting me. Consider subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting, and hit that notification bell to be notified of more videos on my channel. Also, stick around right to the end of this video for a well, you'll see. So yeah, my next goal is 475 followers by the day I get back to uni, which is tomorrow when you're seeing this, so I doubt I would have reached a goal by then, but so it'll probably be 475 followers by the end of September. So yeah, make sure to subscribe and share to help me reach that goal. I will see you all in the next video. Until then, I will see you all next time. Bye.